The MYFORD University Podcast, episode 22. Today we're going to talk about VUCA. Welcome to the MYFORD University show. There's no fluff, no nonsense in this podcast for people who want real-world business skills without the debt, the delay, or the outdated theory of a traditional higher education. Today's episode is a big one. We're going to be talking about how to make smart decisions even when everything around you is uncertain. Specifically, we're diving into the VUCA model, a framework for navigating volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. If you want to lead a team, run a business, or just make better choices in your personal life, you need this skill. VUCA isn't going away. It's the new normal. Let's get into it. So VUCA, I guess we need to say, what is VUCA? Well, VUCA is an acronym. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This model came out of the U.S. military. They used it to describe how warfare had changed. But it's since become a go-to framework for understanding the modern business environment and, honestly, life in general. So here's what each one means in a nutshell. Volatility means fast, unpredictable change. I want you to think interest rates, stock prices, social trends, or even a global pandemic. Uncertainty is about not knowing what's going to happen. You might have data, but it's incomplete or outdated. You can't make confident predictions. Complexity is when there are too many variables or moving parts to see the whole picture. Global supply chains are a perfect example of this. Ambiguity is when there's no clear answer, there's no precedent. You're just kind of walking in the wilderness on this one. You're in uncharted territory. So if you've ever launched a project, changed careers, or led a team through change, or even tried to plan for the future with half the data, you've lived through VUCA. So why does it matter? Here's the thing. Traditional decision-making models assume the world doesn't exist anymore. They assume that you can gather all the facts, evaluate your options, run some numbers, and make a perfect choice. So really what VUCA gets down to is making the best possible decision with the data and information that you have, and then obviously reassessing from time to time. Sometimes that's in real time, and pivoting. So in a VUCA world, you're making calls with incomplete information. The rules keep changing, and delay is often more dangerous than a wrong move. That's why decision-making under uncertainty is now a critical MBA level skill, one that they teach and sometimes don't, but we teach it here at MYFORD University. Because here's the hard truth. If you wait for certainty, you're going to be late. We've talked about the concept of analysis paralysis. Got to wait till everything's perfect. Well, there's no perfect. There's only better, and you can always come up with a workable solution to get started and improve it as you go. But you cannot sit around and wait because the world will pass you by, and it's not like decades ago where you had time. Now things move so fast you can miss opportunities. So VUCA rewards people who can act decisively and learn as they go. Remember, I've said many a time, give me a workable solution and I'll make it better. We'll iterate and we'll make constant improvements. We'll use feedback loops. So VUCA is a powerful framework that helps you get down to the nitty-gritty and make those sort of decisions in imperfect environments. All right, so who needs this skill? The short answer, once again, is everybody, but especially entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out product market fit, or managers and team leaders juggling remote work, challenging priorities and changing priorities, and shrinking budgets. Marketers whose platforms and algorithms change monthly. Hell, some of them change daily and some of them change by the hour, right? Salespeople navigating new buyer behavior. And of course, professionals trying to steer their careers through change. I always go back to Good to Great, Jim Collins. What got us here is not what's going to get us there. So if you're not constantly upgrading, improving, iterating, you're going to get left behind. And it's not just for work, it's also for life. I mean, if you're thinking about a career switch, starting something on your own perhaps, investing in yourself or your business, once again, you're in VUCA territory. You're never going to have all the perfect information. You need to know how to make clear decisions when nothing is clear. Sounds like a strange catch-22, but it's a situation that you're going to be presented with all the time. You got to make the most of what you got and make the decision and start where you are. All right, so when to apply VUCA thinking? Well, when should you bring this model into play? Honestly, almost always, but especially in certain circumstances. And as a project manager, I end up having to do this quite a bit. So here's some examples. I mean, you're faced with a big decision and you don't have all the data. You just got to make the best decision with what you got. Again, no analysis paralysis. Or if you're entering a new market, a role, or industry, going to need it there. You're launching a new product or service. Whew, yeah. Your usual planning methods don't seem to work. Well, they probably don't seem to work because they rely on certain things being, static, but we're living in a dynamic world. Or you're hearing conflicting advice, feedback, or signals. This happens quite a bit. I will sometimes, solicit opinions and say, what would you do in this circumstance? And I'll listen to a few of them, and then ultimately, I'm the one who's accountable, and I've got to make a decision based on it. So I will kind of weigh all of those different opinions on how to proceed, but ultimately I have to make a decision. And then, of course, we can always pivot. Hopefully we don't have to backtrack too much. If you're stuck saying things like, I don't know what's going to happen, or this has never happened before, once again, you're in a VUCA situation. That's your signal to switch to this particular playbook. And the VUCA model is very handy when it comes to doing that. Let's go a little deeper. Where does VUCA tend to show up? The answer, again, as you might have guessed, is everywhere. So let's talk business first. Strategic planning. Markets change too fast for 5-year plans. Product launches. Consumer expectations can shift almost overnight. There's always the next big thing coming down the pike. Hiring. The job you hired someone for might change in 6 months. There may be some significant changes. Certain jobs are going to, be either assisted or replaced by AI. Marketing. Of course, the algorithms can shift. Audiences can evolve. Probably a good idea in many cases to diversify a little bit. All right, how about operations? One shipping container struck in the wrong port can cause a global ripple. Let's also talk about personal life. If you're switching careers in a shaky economy, well, hello, that's now. Investing in a side hustle or business. Moving to a new place without knowing if it's going to work out. Sometimes it helps to send some test scouts ahead. Choosing between multiple unknown options. Sometimes you might have a better decision that could be made, but it may not come until tomorrow. And sometimes you got to make a decision based on today. Again, this is why VUCA decision making isn't optional anymore. It's essential. All right, my favorite part. How do we make decisions using VUCA? Well, let's get practical. Each VUCA condition has a corresponding leadership response. Here's the matrix we use at MYFORD University. Volatility. We believe in responding with vision. So when the environment is unstable or you need a stable direction, not a rigid plan, but a clear vision of where you're going, that means set you long-term goals, communicate them clearly, anchor your actions to that direction, even if tactics change. Again, you always have to be ready to pivot and make adjustments. If the waves are rough, you don't stop sailing. You just keep steering towards your destination. All right. How do we deal with uncertainty? Well, we respond with understanding. If you don't have all the facts, your job is to learn quickly. How? Well, you might run small experiments. I'm going to get into a discussion on scientific method. Um, I always believe in testing, prototypes, any sort of mock-ups, anything that can get you an idea of how it might work. It might not even be a physical model. It could just be a conceptual statement. Um, how about A/B testing? If you're not familiar with what that is, that gets really into scientific method. What you do is you have a control method, and then you do a variable. You change something, and again, it's best to always only change one thing so you know for sure if it made the difference. And in many cases, there's something known as blue-green testing. You have the baseline, the most successful approach, and you're constantly doing tests against it. And once you find a better approach, that becomes the new baseline. Pilot projects. You might want to do some pilot projects before you scale. I am a firm believer in doing small test batches and seeing how it works out and then tweaking it before you do a full-blown rollout. It can save you time, money, and heartache. You might ask customers early and often. I firmly believe in getting feedback from customers as often as you can. Don't overwhelm them, and I would only go with one thing at a time to them. I wouldn't hit them with choices because choice sometimes creates its own problems, so be careful there. Again, it's not about being right. It's about being curious and adjusting fast. You got to iterate. That's basically, where agile management gets into play. We'll do a full-blown article on that as well. Complexity. We like to respond with clarity. Don't try to solve everything. Simplify, prioritize. I always say go for the low-hanging fruit. Get the small wins first and build momentum. You might want to use certain tools like mind maps, 80-20 analysis, or decision trees. I will have full-blown articles on these in the coming months. Again, these are different approaches that can help you. 80-20 rule is also known as the Pareto principle. That one's coming up sooner than later, so look for it. You might want to identify what really matters and drop the rest. Complexity kills momentum. Clarity restores it. I always say you want to make the complex simple, not the simple complex. Sometimes you got to rip it down to its foundations. Again, we've talked about first principles thinking. Again, you want to know more about that, MYFORDuniversity.com. Go in the blog section, full-blown article. Next, ambiguity. We want to respond with agility. When there's no clear answer, you don't freeze like a deer in the headlights. You build flexible systems. You want to do scenario planning. You want to have contingencies, especially as a project manager. You always want to have contingency plans. You always want to anticipate. That's scenario planning. You want to cross-train your team so that they aren't caught flat-footed and can deal and roll with the punches. You want to stay light on your feet and not get caught on your heels. You can't eliminate ambiguity, but you can outmaneuver it. You just have to do a little bit of pre-planning. I always say 80% of the project success is tied up in the preparation. All right, let's do an example in action here. Let's say you're launching a new online course. The market is shifting, platforms are changing, you don't know what your audience wants most. Old school thinking says, do 6 months of research, build it perfectly, and then launch. That's slow, that's fragile, that's VUCA denial. Here's what you really want to do. You want to launch a beta test with 10 people. Oh, and that's kind of a hint. I'm going to be launching courses in the coming weeks, and I will be looking for small beta groups to do exactly this. I want to gather feedback. I want to improve it fast. I want to adapt the pricing and the messaging, and then I want to relaunch with clarity. And that's when you start to go big once you find the winning combination. Again, A/B testing. This is where VUCA decision-making in action, it's fast, it's focused, it's responsive. You want to make sure that you're going in the right direction, and if not, you want to quickly pivot and adjust. All right, we're going to make this one a short one. Here's some final thoughts. Here's what I want you to take away from this particular episode. Ready? The world isn't going to get more stable. It's going to get faster, messier, and more uncertain. We're not living in a static environment. It's a highly dynamic environment. Decades ago, it was static. Your grandfather, your great-grandfather, things moved rather slowly, and you could work with the same thing for years. Not today. You're not even talking years in some cases. Sometimes you're talking months. Maybe you're even talking weeks. The people who win in this environment are the ones who know how to lead through it, not wait it out. You cannot wait it out. You have to roll with the punches. You got to test, pivot, iterate, adjust, get feedback, do it again, rinse and repeat. So vision, understanding, clarity, agility. That's your VUCA playbook. And here at MYFORD University, we're not teaching you theory for theory's sake. We're giving you the tools to use today to lead better, to think smarter, and to make decisions that actually move the needle. We believe in learning it fast and applying it faster. In fact, it almost doesn't make sense to learn it if you're not going to apply it right away, because that's what cements it in you. That's what gives you a level of confidence to use it. So I highly recommend you try it. If you found this useful, here's what I'd like you to do next. I want you to subscribe to this podcast. We drop practical episodes like this weekly. And by the way, it's free. Grab other sources. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. You might want to go to the blog where you can see the full-blown articles. YouTube, there are videos. If you're serious about upgrading your business thinking, look for our programs that are coming in the next few weeks. I would say by the first week of October, you're going to see quite a few things different, particularly on the site, which is MYFORDuniversity.com. So until next time, remember, don't wait for perfect information. I always say there's no such thing as perfect, only better. You're never going to get perfect information, but move with purpose, adjust with speed, and lead with clarity. That's how you're going to win in a VUCA world. Talk to you soon. Again, George Sloan from MyFordUniversity.com, where you can learn it fast and apply it faster. We'll see you the next time. Thank you.